Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to another episode of the Blacknight podcast, presented by me, Elon, CEO and founder of Blacknight, and my able-bodied assistant, Jonathan, who hails from the US of A.
Hello.
So we're recording this today, Friday, 15th of April, which is Good Friday, which is the Friday of the Easter weekend. And before we came on air, Jonathan and I were talking about Easter and one of those rather silly cultural differences where Good Friday here is kind of like a holiday, but it's not really, but it is, but it isn't, and nobody's too sure whether they're coming or they're going because a load of stuff is open, a load of stuff is closed. But we all know and agree that Monday is definitely a holiday, except if you're American, because apparently you don't get Monday off, and I thought that was very cruel.
Yeah, because Easter conveniently falls on the Sunday, it's back to work on Monday.
But
I
Easter
know.
always falls on a Sunday.
Exactly. So it's not a real holiday here because it's not on a weekday. And then Good Friday in some places will be a holiday. Like today, it's kind of half of a holiday. Like my kids don't have school today, but they'll be in school Monday, and I'm lucky. The Irish company I work for is closed Monday because I don't have to come to work. But you know,
We could probably just force you to work anyway, which would just be cruel and unusual punishment,
I'll just
mildly entertaining.
I'll just be shouting into the empty void that is the Slack because it's dead on holidays.
Well, true, fair enough. There's no point in you doing that. Anyway, so it's been a kind of interesting enough week or two in the wonderful world of technology.
Yes, it has. A very surprising week that no one really saw coming.
Yeah, so let's talk about a couple of things. So let's talk about a couple of the internal Blacknight specific things. Let's get them out of the way. And then we'll move on to bigger picture. So we sent out an email in the last couple of days and I wrote a short blog post all about Windows hosting.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, bing bong.
Ding dong. The OS is dead. The OS is dead.
Something like that. Yeah, so this one, it's one of these things I think some people get a little bit confused by. And I mean, I tweeted something about this the other day, and one person who follows me was saying, oh, strange that you're doing that, because if anything, we find that our Windows hosting is more popular than our Linux hosting, which is quite the opposite to our experience. We have a lot, or had a lot, of clients who were using Windows hosting simply because it was available, not because they actually used any of the technology. So switching them away from Windows to Linux just made sense. And so quite a few of them have been switching over the last few years. And to be honest, we haven't even taken a new sign up for Windows since, this time 3 years ago, back in 2019. So we're killing off the service completely in the next couple of months. We still do plenty of Windows hosting. We still have thousands of servers running Windows, but we're just not offering it in our quote-unquote shared hosting. Did you ever have a Windows hosting account, Jonathan?
I've never had a Windows hosting account. Ever since I started hosting now 15 years, it's always been Linux-based because that's just the standard now. And, Windows is a very, everyone's familiar with Windows. It's a graphical system. It doesn't really make sense in a server environment because it doesn't use half the features that it has, And it's, Linux is just better because it's designed for the modern web.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Not exactly take it, but okay. So back years back, we had things like Microsoft Front Page, and Front Page Express. And Front Page Express came installed on all PCs.
I remember.
So the thing is, you could design a website using Front Page Express, and then you would upload it to a hosting provider somewhere that supported what were called front page extensions. And the front page extensions were basically like server-side bits of software that did things. So you just put in a little kind of 1 or 2 lines of code, and then stuff would happen magically. You could put in like web counters and page visit counters of different kinds, or include the time, or maybe an interactive form or something using these various extensions. This was like,
Accessing
programming without actually being able to program.
Right.
Yeah, I can tell
Now,
you're a big Windows fan. I can tell.
it's funny. I'm a Mac household, but my son, he's really into gaming, so he has a PC, and so now we have arguments constantly about how that he thinks Windows is better than Mac, and I'm just like, no, no.
Well, this is what that's one the gaming side of things. I think is where Mac has always fallen flat. I mean, there's
That is true. I don't game, so I just don't care.
no. I'm not disagreeing with you. I mean, it's just I mean, I'm not a big gamer either, and I remember back in 2020 when we were kind of heading into lockdown and
Yeah.
all that. I was trying to find games I could play on the Mac, and yeah, the options were a bit limited to say the least.
Yeah, you and I played quite a few games of Civilization, I remember.
Yeah, and the other fun thing I found was that a lot of stuff was only available for 32-bit. And
Yeah.
I did have a 32-bit old Mac knocking around, but that one's gone. Well, it's not gone, I mean, it's still there, but I can't really use it anymore. It's a bit mad. Anyway, moving on. We've fallen down a rabbit hole talking about gaming on the Mac and how it's not ideal. Another bit of a Blacknight kerfuffle is we mentioned it, I think, on the last podcast about this waiver and everything that ICANN wanted us to agree to.
Yes, it gets deeper.
It gets deeper and deeper. So ICANN have formally responded, and their response was to send me/us to an FAQ on their website where they say that they addressed the queries. And I suppose the diplomatic way of describing that would be, we definitely have a disagreement in terms of what I would see as a response of what they think is a response. So the plot will thicken, I suppose, is the best way of putting it. Watch this space. I cannot in good conscience ask anybody who's working for us, either as an employee or a contractor, to attend an event and agree to a waiver like that. That's just not possible. I can't. I mean, it's not just a case of signing away my own rights. I would be forcing somebody else to sign away their own rights, plus the rights of their heirs, which I find really, really offensive. I find the entire thing is just so ridiculously offensive.
Yeah, and it makes me, I'm sort of concerned now. I mean, what do you think NamesCon will do? Do you think they'll require some kind of waiver, or do you think they just won't care because they're in Texas?
I suspect there'll be a waiver of some sort, but I suspect it'll be the kind of normal waiver that you get everywhere, which is along the lines of, COVID is a problem. Don't take proper precautions. Comply with the guidelines. Blah blah blah. Don't try suing us because we really haven't got the patience for this. I mean, so just a very kind of the standard kind of waivers I've seen for a number of events, which are just basically don't be a dick about it. I mean, it's you've got COVID is a thing. Don't be stupid. I mean, that's it, which is perfectly fine. I have no issue with a company wanting to protect itself from frivolous claims. I totally get that. But there's a massive gap between stopping or dissuading people from making frivolous claims and asking them, or actually not even asking them, demanding that they sign away all their rights. There's a huge gap between those two. Anyway, let's move on. So I think the topic that we did want to spend a little bit more time on was something. Well, you could tell us about this. Something a little spicier.
Well, we'd like to talk about Twitter, and everybody's talking about Twitter right now. And the reason everyone's talking about Twitter is a couple reasons. Now, Twitter you and I have a long history on Twitter. I even recently downloaded my Twitter archive and found you and I tweeting back and forth back in like 2008. It was like internet archaeology.
Why I was nice to you?
Yeah, you were very nice.
Well, that's because you didn't work for me at the time, so that's why.
No, you're still nice to me. Please. So, yeah, I've always kind of held Twitter at an arm's length, but you and I both spend a lot of time on Twitter, and so we're kind of invested in how Twitter operates and the way they do things, and we are usually very vocal when we don't like something, and we'll talk about Musk in a minute, but the big thing is last week is Twitter have been clamoring for an edit button for years, because the only way to edit a tweet is to delete it and redo it, and that's just, that's too much for some people. So users have been demanding an edit button, and Twitter announced last week that they are developing an edit button as like, they're putting lots of development hours and creating a button that allows you to edit something. And the problem, though, is that with Twitter being an open forum and sort of the public square of the internet, an edit button is not an easy thing to do. It's actually rather complicated when you start to think about the issues that having an edit button can do.
Now, okay, so let's stop there for a second. Okay, so I think the problem here is that at a high level, when somebody says, look, I need an edit button because I type something quickly on my mobile phone and the autocorrect makes me look like an idiot, and I've sent that out now to hundreds, if not thousands, or potentially even millions of people across the globe are now frantically trying to understand what the hell Kofeev is, which I think was one of the more famous Donald Trump typos from a few years. I mean, that's probably, but okay, so allowing people to fix a typo seems perfectly reasonable, but what's the problem with that?
Well, and the problem is that what happens because when you develop things through the internet, you have to think of the worst case scenario that somebody will do with it, because they will.
Of course they will.
And if you created something to edit a typo, well, then what's to stop them from adding a word or two, or completely changing the meaning of the tweet that's already in the public record? And that's where the sort of the idea of an edit button breaks down. Is a simple thing becomes complicated very quickly, especially when you have public officials who tweet and their tweets are public record and can't be altered. So,
well, that's an American thing, not a global thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, under U.S. law, everything that comes from your public officials is considered to be, I think it has to be archived or something.
Right.
It's considered the same as any of their official papers. Well, I don't think we have anything quite like that. Okay, so I mean, when we look at, say, a forum like over here, boards.ie, if I post something on boards.ie or any of these other fora, usually I will have some kind of opportunity to edit it for clarity or to clean up some kind of screw up of my typing. Why is Twitter any different?
Well, the difference is that on Twitter, misinformation, propaganda, you name it,
you get misinformation and propaganda on Reddit. Get misinformation and things like that. You get that on boards.ie as well. I'm sure. I haven't looked really, but I'm sure you do. What's the difference?
I don't know, Michele, what is the difference?
No, I have lots of reasons why. I'm trying to get you to tell me what the difference is.
The difference is, okay, look at like recent court cases where, like in Britain, someone has made a bad tweet and like they made a threat towards a public official, and that tweet becomes public record and becomes evidence in a court case. Well, what happens if they edited that tweet? Did that tweet happen? Will Twitter archive the versions of the edited tweet so that it still exists somewhere? What is their responsibility to the integrity of the tweet? What is a tweet? No,
I mean, I don't disagree with you. I mean, okay, obviously I do understand some of the problems with this. I mean, before we kind of get into talking about the edit thing, there was something that Twitter was attempting to do, which was to make a change. Now, I'm not sure what the rationale was, but they were making a change to how embedded tweets behaved on websites.
Yeah, and it was going to break.
And they decided, as part of some change that they were making internally, that tweets that had been deleted would no longer work as embedded content on third-party websites. Now, I hadn't actually realized that tweets from suspended accounts or entire tweets that actually had been deleted, if you had embedded them before they were deleted or before the account was deleted or was changed or whatever, it would still work. So they rolled out this change, and then so like lots of websites, I mean probably millions, lost loads of their content. I mean this stuff just kind of vanished.
Yeah, and you've got journalism that uses Twitter as a source. Suddenly, part of their source has disappeared. Like that's you can't break.
Oh, it's a problem. So, look, in tying this back to the edit thing, what one of my friends did last week, because he likes to. Well, he just likes to show these things off, and he's not wrong. He did is he tweeted something to somebody. They replied, and then what he did is he then photoshopped his original. He changed his original tweet in a Photoshop and sent it back, so that it'd be something like, "Do you like coffee?" is the original tweet, and you say, "Yes, I love coffee." And then you edit the tweet to be something like, do you like young children? Or do you like beating your wife? You can just change it. You can change it to something quite horrific and quite. I mean, it doesn't have to be anything that horrific. But this is the problem. So the thing with this kind of edit issue is that while allowing people to edit the tweet in order to correct a typo or something like that is probably not a bad idea, the devil's in the details. I mean, should you allow somebody to edit a tweet within the first minute after they tweet it, or the first 5 minutes, or the first 10 minutes? Or should you, or how do you allow them to fix an orthographic issue, or a typo or something like that, without allowing them to change the meaning of a tweet substantially?
Right.
Because it would be wide open to abuse. Of course it would.
Yeah, and I think my stance is that an edit button would be nice, but to be honest, I've made tweeted mistakes all the time. It happens, and I know I've even done it from
as your editor. I'm aware.
Yeah,
of this.
even as on the Blacknight account, it's happened occasionally. But it's not overly onerous to just delete the tweet and do it over again. Like, so I don't, it'd be nice to have an edit button, but it's not like everybody's tweet is going into the public record and is important that it can't be deleted and redone. So I don't see the need for the edit button. It might be useful for businesses to fix errors, but I don't really see the need.
I mean, I can look from my perspective. I tend to agree with you. I mean, it would be nice if there was a way to facilitate the correction of the typo type scenario. But the problem is once you post something within the first, if you actually look at the average lifespan of a tweet, which I think is something that's quite fascinating, and people like Matt Navarra and a few of these others who have done lots of experiments on social media and how things interact. There's metrics out there you can look at. If you tweet something, tweets may exist forever. I mean, they may not disappear, but when you tweet something, if it's going to go viral, it'll probably go viral within the first 10, 20 minutes or so, and that will only last for a certain period of time, after which it just kind of drops off over time. Like the clicks reduce, the retweets reduce, etc., etc.
Yeah,
sometimes they can come back, which is really
weird. And like I was just talking about with looking at my old Twitter archive, try and look at your old tweets. It's not easy. It's not easy to do, especially if you've tweeted, especially after 15 years and thousands of tweets. Like you've made.
Well, the advanced search option on the Twitter web interface is how I find my own tweets.
Yeah, that's
because it's often a case of I know I tweeted the link to an article about topic X, but God only knows when it was. So I have to go off and search my own tweets. But the point is that once the thing has gone viral, so people are retweeting it and sharing it and embedding it and doing all these things to it. So I mean, if it once it's done that, I mean, you shouldn't be able to change it.
Exactly, because changing it then changes, especially if it materially changes the tweet in a way. All those people that have retweeted it or reshared it, like it suddenly they
it's something different.
Yeah, let's say I hate Nazis, and then you change to I love Nazis, and 10 million people have retweeted it. Well, it's just it'll definitely be abused unless they have rules in place to prevent that abuse. But even then, the internet works by people finding loopholes, and people will exploit those loopholes. And if Twitter's not careful, it will cause more problems for them than not having an edit button.
Which brings us to Mr. Musk.
Saint Elon, yes.
Well, depending on who you ask. I mean, I've seen actually some of the quote unquote hot takes on this entire thing. So let's go back. Let's see what happened. So Elon Musk's been on Twitter for years. He's got an insanely high following. I think it's like, is it 80 million followers or something like that?
Yeah, it's crazy high.
It's crazy high. Let me just double check actually.
It's his favorite social network.
81.9 million followers. Which is, crazy.
That's the population of what? The entire west coast of the U.S. plus.
Well, I don't care about the US. That is, like, the population of Ireland is about 5 million, just to give you some perspective. So it's more than 10, his Twitter following is more than 10 times the population of Ireland.
Wow.
Anyway, it's ridiculously high. It's absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, he's the... What is he? He's the richest man in the world at the moment.
Well, him and Jeff Bezos switch back and forth a lot depending on, who's performing better at any given time. But yeah, he's the richest man in the world who has ambitions for the electric economy. Why the hell does he want to waste time with Twitter? He's got more important things to do. But what I think what's really happened is he had to sell a lot of Tesla stock recently, and he needs somewhere to put the money. So he's like, I'll just put it in Twitter. But then the investment in Twitter I could understand, but then he tried to get on the board, and then the board was like, well, no, we don't actually want you on the board.
No, that's not what. I don't think that's what happened at all.
What happened?
So he bought over 9% of Twitter's shares.
Right.
I mean, bear in mind, it's a publicly traded company, so anybody who wants to can buy shares. It's just some of the other hot takes about people going, I mean, how could they let this happen? It's like, it's a publicly traded company.
Yeah.
So people can buy shares in a publicly traded company, get over it. Sure, we can think that him buying Twitter is a bad thing, or a good thing, or whatever, and that's fine, but don't kind of make out that it's some big black helicopter type scenario. I mean, it's a publicly traded company. All he did was instruct somebody to buy a load of shares for him. So with a holding that big, him having a seat on the board is not particularly strange. I mean, as the single largest shareholder.
Right.
He was meant to be going onto the Twitter board, but then he said that he wouldn't go on the Twitter board, which immediately triggered some people to think that there was a reason for that, because if you were going to go on the Twitter board, he was going to be limited in the percentage of the company that he could actually own.
Right.
Where by saying, no, actually, I'm not going to go on the board, that removed that restriction. So that was immediately triggered speculation that he was going to go for an aggressive takeover move, which was announced yesterday.
Yeah.
Where he made an offer to buy the entire company in a hostile bid, offering $54.20 per share, which brings the valuation of the entire company to $43 billion, which is a lot of money.
Yeah, and yeah, it's a mind-boggling amount of money, and I'm skeptical that Twitter is even worth that much. It's only marginally profitable, and it has a big impact on discourse and the media. But I mean, it's not Facebook, and it's not Instagram, and it's not the TikTok. It's Twitter. You know.
Yeah, but I mean so the thing is, okay, so at the moment, publicly traded company, listed on the stock exchange, all that kind of thing. Musk wants to take it private.
Yeah, and
If you,
I understand why. I mean, his stance with Tesla is that the shareholders are an inconvenience, which is why he won't take SpaceX public. He doesn't want to have to answer to anybody for his Martian plans. So there is a benefit for him to having it private, and I just don't know if Twitter being in his own personal private hands is the best thing for Twitter.
yeah, I mean the problem, I suppose, that some people would say that he publicly states at times that he's a big advocate for free speech,
American style free speech.
American style free speech, but which also tends to mean as well that he wants people, including himself, to be able to say whatever the hell they want, as long, of course, as it's positive about him. I mean, he does take serious issue with people who criticize him.
Yes.
He's not exactly the most, what's the word we're looking for? He doesn't like it. He doesn't really like his critics.
No.
No. So, I mean, I read an interesting piece in The Guardian a couple of days back where somebody was talking about Musk. How this thing about him saying that he's in favor of free speech, and it goes into an entire thing about what that actually means and whether it's actually true or not, and based on past experience and everything else. I don't know. I mean, I just find the entire thing with Musk this to be just very, very strange. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's so not what he has said many times are his goals right now. Playing around with a
right.
social network is not in his plans of the last 20 years. And while he does like Twitter, I wonder what the real play is here. And my concern, which is echoed by a lot of other people on Twitter, is that yeah, he wants to make it this bastion of free speech, which it already kind of is, but that they will take a less hard line on banning people and whatnot, and that they could conceivably let Donald Trump back on, which would be terrible.
Yeah.
And I like, Twitter has Twitter. It took a long time for Twitter to have a backbone with these public figures spewing their bullshit, and I think that I'd hate to see them backslide under Musk's leadership, and I'd hate to go into the 2024 presidential election cycle with Donald Trump back on Twitter if he's going to run. And even if he doesn't run, it'll still be damaging to the whole election. I don't think that. No, yeah. The concern is how would Musk's stamp change Twitter in a negative way, and I don't really see very many positives other than that there's less of a focus on profitability and more on a long term game. And I don't know. The whole thing, like you said, the whole thing is strange. I don't know why he would want to do this. It's not like he doesn't have $43 billion on hand, so he's gonna have to sell holdings and other things to get the money or get loans. And it's not what he has said many times he wants to deal with. He wants to get to Mars and get everyone to buy an electric car. I don't get everyone to play on Twitter. Doesn't seem, just it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, look, ultimately, I mean, what will be. But the problem is that if with him, I mean, this the piece which we can share in the show notes. The title of the piece that I was reading, I think, sums it up nicely. Elon Musk's vision for the internet is dangerous nonsense, and they found just because somebody is rich and successful and all that does not mean that they are the best person to to be given control over the town square. I mean, I look at successful business people, while I can look up to and respect some of their achievements, and I'm glad that they've done some of the things that they've done, and I'm probably not glad they've done all the things that they've done. I wouldn't want them in charge of things like certain things, because the way that they would run them would be beneficial only to them, not to the broader public.
Yeah, I mean, let's do a thought exercise here. How would the discourse be different if Jeff Bezos tried to buy Twitter? Or let's say someone who's disinterested in technology, like Warren Buffett, tried to buy Twitter. How would the...
See, something like Warren Buffett, I mean, Warren Buffett, perfectly good example. Warren Buffett buys Twitter, nobody cares, because, I mean, if anything, he would probably force it to be more profitable than it currently is. I mean, maybe he'd shut down certain services. I don't know, but I mean, he's not going to be getting involved in the day-to-day running of a company. That's not going to be his style.
And even his managerials probably wouldn't get too involved. That's not. They come in, they put their stamp on it, and they have a very hands-off approach to managing, as long as they continue to make money.
For them, it's just an investment.
Yeah.
That's what the way they approach it. Whereas
Musk has a reason he wants to do it, which makes it dangerous.
Quite disturbing.
Yeah, it's not just, I see this asset, it's valuable, I want to invest in it so I can make money off it. It's like, well, that's neither here nor there.
Wasn't he talking about setting up his own social media network recently?
I don't know. I don't remember.
No, I mean, the thing I was kind of half thinking about as well was that, let's say, and I read somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, something about how Musk could just go off and set up his own social network if his takeover bid for Twitter fails.
Yeah,
and I was thinking,
it's working great for Trump and Gab and all the other dog shit, social networks.
Well, the way I was looking at it is that, okay, he has 81 million followers. So if he was to set up something, then maybe a percentage of the hardcore fans might follow him. But
that's not enough to build a self-sustaining social network. And
no, that's I think is the problem he's going to face, because if you look at, like, say, messaging apps, every time there's some kind of kerfuffle about Facebook Meta and what they're doing with data, people sign up get worried about WhatsApp and start signing up for Signal and various other things, and I see all these new users landing onto those apps, but they don't stay around.
No, because that's not where people are, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, you go on the App Store, there are at least 20 Instagram clones, but none of them have hit critical mass, and no one uses them, because Instagram is where the audience is at, Facebook is where the audience is at, like Twitter is where is a much smaller force, but that's where people who don't want to be on those networks hang out. And so there's not really... Yeah, you could create your own social network for sycophants, but it's not a sustainable business model.
No, I mean, you could you don't have to spend a lot of money on this.
No.
You can download the code for Mastodon and set up your own Mastodon instance, a cheap enough VPS from a company such as ourselves.
Yeah, you could have it up in an afternoon. Yeah, you could have it up in an afternoon, but no one's going to use it. So
No.
It's
no. I mean, Mastodon is an interesting one, because the idea of this kind of decentralized type thing, and there's a kind of a federated aspect to it, and. But there's a small subset of people who are using it actively. But
yeah, that's only ever going to appeal to tech nerds like us. And
no, well, I'm sorry, you do not get to include me in that group, because I haven't got the patience for dealing with that.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I've actually looked into Mastodon, and there's a there's a federated Mastodon thing for images that is like an Instagram clone. I forget the name. The name escapes me, but you look into these and you're like, oh well, I could run my own instance and then I could just build my own fan base on this instance. But then you look into actually installing this stuff, getting it to run, and it's actually extremely difficult. And it's not, and then getting people to sign up for it and to care about the idea of a federated, distributed social network. People don't care. They just want to use Facebook. And until somebody comes along and makes a better Facebook, I don't see these smaller things hitting critical mass.
I mean, the thing is, every time I tweeted something about the Musk and Twitter, and got a couple of responses from people that I've been interacting with on various mailing lists and social networks going back the better part of 20 years. And they're referencing long defunct social networks that we all thought at the time were going to be the place to do things, the place to build out communities, the place to spend time, energy, and effort. And most of them they flared up. They were brilliant for a short period of time, and then they just
Faded
went
away.
out. I mean, they were just gone.
Well, and when you look at the history of stuff like first MySpace and then Twitter and then Facebook, a lot of them, the way they are now is not the way they started. Especially in the example of Twitter. Twitter was like an accident. It was like a side project, of another startup. And same thing with Blogger. It was like an accident. Like these things, they don't really necessarily start. They don't become the thing they intended them to be when they were created. They become something else once people use them, and I don't really see how that can happen again when you have such monolithic networks now.
Yeah.
It's just, I just don't see anybody starting anything from scratch and it being a success. I mean, there's a graveyard of right-wing social networks already, and it's just...
Well, it's not just, and that's not like clear. I mean, it's not just the right-wing ones. I mean, there's plenty, like there's lots and lots of social networks that are for niches, and they can survive in the sense that they can be potentially big enough to be self-sustaining, but not big enough to have that kind of global reach and impact.
Yeah.
And maybe that's fine. But the thing is, I mean, like we've seen them rise and fall. I mean, here in Ireland, Bebo was massive at one point. It was absolutely huge. Everybody was on Bebo. Nowadays, like nobody in Bebo's just something people are going to go, oh yeah, I remember that. It's long gone. I think it's changed owners several times since its peak.
I think it's back in the hands of the original founder now.
Quite possibly, but I mean, the thing is that it was what it was, and it like everything else, it was popular for a while, and now it's not. Anyway, look, we'll see what happens over the coming days and weeks. If this thing with Musk goes ahead, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. I mean, I don't know how I would react, really.
Yeah, I don't think he'll succeed in his bid. I think he's going to make a lot of noise, but I think Twitter is going to be like, we're worth more than this, and he's just going to walk. But you can't underestimate how bad a rich man wants something. He's building rocket ships to Mars. I mean, he's a very determined person. So.
Yeah, I mean, look, we'll see what happens. I mean, you see people have ideas from time to time, and sometimes they put a lot of energy and effort into them, and we'll see what happens. I mean, I just think that from my own personal perspective, I'm curious to see where this ends, and if nothing really changes, well, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I am at it. I don't really care whose billionaire plaything Twitter is, as long as Twitter doesn't really material change because of it. Yeah, that's kind of where I am at it, and yeah.
Anyway, we'll pick this up again, I'm sure.
Okay.
So, So thanks for joining us yet again. We'll be back again in a couple of weeks' time, probably.
After your holidays.
Shh! Don't jinx them. We're not talk. We'll talk about them if after the fact. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye bye.
Goodbye.